Welcome everyone to GSBI Speaks webinar series. We think we've got a really exciting group of people who are going to talk this afternoon in our panel. And so I want to welcome you. I want to acknowledge this, this slide you're seeing about the report. If you haven't had a chance to look it up, on the left are all the partners who were involved with it. And we especially want to thank the many scientists globally who spent hours contributing to this very important report. I just want to give you a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Number one, this is being taped and recorded and will be available on YouTube in a few days. And so you can find out more about that later as we go through. Secondly, we love your questions and the way this is going to proceed. Carlos will talk a little bit about in a second, our moderator, and we will have the panel talk, and then we will have plenty of time for questions, so you can be putting yours into the Q&A. Also, I just wanted to mention that if we don't get to all of your questions, we appreciate that you've asked them, and perhaps they would be something that you would want to ask an individual panelist later if it's not brought up in the main talk. So just so we have plenty of time, I want to get started by introducing Carlos Guerra. Carlos, I'll wait for his picture to come up. He is at the German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research, and he will be moderating this panel this afternoon.
Thank you, Diana. And thank you all for attending this webinar. We will try to keep to the rules that Diana just stated, but what I would like to highlight is that you can post your questions at any time during anyone's talk, and during the Q&A you can also post new questions if you want to. Me and some other people here at the GSBI will monitor these questions and will compile them in a way that makes sense for the Q&A. And hopefully also makes sense for you. So together with me and Diana are Erin Cameron. She's from Canada, and she's going to speak to us about the potential North American network for soil biodiversity. Erin, you can say hi if you want. Then we will have Luca Montanarella that comes to us from Italy. And he is going to speak about a project that is quite fun of me. It's Lucas. It's a European project that actually monitors soils across all Europe. And then we'll have Ika Djukic from, now if I'm correct, she's in Austria. And she's going to talk to us about the T-composition network that is what she calls a network of networks that brings together data from many different things and many different networks to account for litter decomposition. And then we will end up with Andy Gonzalez, the current chair of GEOBond, and he will try to wrap all of this with a bit more of a context to where we are on this. So this means that I will start showing you the reason why we are here, but I just need 1 second because I realized that my power is going to go off and I need just 1 minute. Technical issues. So the part of why we are here is not entirely all of it, but it's because we 2 years ago started forming what is now called GEOBond, so the Global Soil Biodiversity Observation Network. And this aims to target, track, and ultimately create instruments to preserve soil biodiversity worldwide. This is actually a call that is already in the state of knowledge of soil biodiversity from FAO, this report from FAO that brings together all these talks. And this report highlights the need for two different things: to, on one hand, to mobilize data on soil biodiversity, and on the other hand, to create a mechanism that allows us to actually monitor soil biodiversity in a more straightforward forward way, also at the global scale. So together with a very large number of scientists, we put together what we think is a favorable approach to monitor soils globally. And for this, we also think that we need to have a more holistic approach to how we view soils, not only from a productive point of view, but also as a nature conservation standard that we have to meet in order to be able to protect diversity on Earth. To do that, we compiled a number of, or we put together a number of institutions that go from the universities to practitioners to very large global institutions. And the basic aim of this is to create a platform that many others can contribute to, and that we create a system that allows to view soils and view soil biodiversity across the world in a comprehensive way. To do that, what we propose is that we find standard ways of looking at soils. These standard ways don't come only from using standard protocols, but in our case, they come from using one single laboratory for one single analysis. This also means that we have to provide the system that allows people to contribute to without having overhead costs in terms of them sending samples to us or us having an overview of what is happening out there. So what you're looking here is to a large set of variables or of things that we are going to measure from each soil sample. And for each one of these, one single lab is going to perform all the analysis on all the samples, guaranteeing that way a standardization of the measurements that are going to be done. We also plan to have this monitoring scheme start already this year. This will require your help. And in order to do that, we also created a baseline fund that allows for people to contribute without having extra costs. And with the principle that the soil is yours, the data is yours, but you allow us to use it. And you allow us to have a standardized platform that creates a system that independently of where you are in the world, you can contribute to it without having to commit yourself too much, at least. But it also allows you to promote your own systems in your own countries. And we will be here also to help you with that. Just to make clear, this is not an easy process because we are in different countries and international law applies. So actually, if you want to contribute to Soil One, we will really much appreciate, but this will require at least a bit of commitment on your side to allow us or help us overcome some legal problems that every country has in terms of asking for permits, understanding how we can overcome some of these things. But it also will open opportunities for you to collaborate in a project that aims to understand if current nature conservation measures actually do something for soils and actually contribute for nature conservation in soil systems. So following up this, Erin Cameron will show us a bit of how this can also be reenacted for a regional scale, in this case, for the North America scale. Erin, maybe you can start now.
There we go. I'll just share my screen. Oops. Okay, so as Carlos mentioned, Soil-BON is happening at a global scale, but it's also possible to use these standardized protocols at a regional level. And so basically, even if you're not watching this from North America or Canada, some of the things that I'm going to talk about might be good reasons for you to think about starting a regional Soil-BON in your area of the world. So the reason that I think that we kind of need a Canadian or North American version is that we actually have substantial geographical gaps in our knowledge of soil biodiversity data, particularly in Canada. So here on this slide, you can see a couple of maps that we've made after reviewing the literature. So on the left are 3 major global data sets for soil bacteria, soil macrofauna, and soil fungi. And I've just clipped out the North America and South America version. So you can see that there's a lot of empty space in Canada in particular. Then a couple of years after we wrote this paper, we, led by Carlos, did a larger literature survey and found more data on soil biodiversity that was out there. So you can see that map on the right here. So there is more coverage of a lot of North America, which is encouraging, but we still have substantial gaps in what we know about soil biodiversity throughout the North American continent, particularly again in Northern Canada. So this is why I think that a regional network would be quite useful to allow us to collect more data at local scales. The other thing that we'll be able to get at if we start some more regional networks within the global Soil-BON is we can collect more detailed data that could be more relevant for local to national policy. The global Soil-BON may have about 1,000 points, probably as many as are possible, but clearly within a country like Canada, the global share of 1,000 points won't cover a lot of the finer eco-regions within the country. So one issue that's a problem in both Canada and the US, which Soil-BON may have some potential to help with, is that we do have some existing monitoring in Canada, but it's spread across a range of different agencies, and they all use very different methods. So in Canada, we have Environment and Climate Change Canada, Natural Resources Canada, and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. The arrows there in Eastern Canada there's actually 2 different biodiversity monitoring projects that are happening right now with run by different parts of Agriculture Canada. So even within agencies, there's monitoring that's split using different methods. And the US is similar with a variety of agencies that are responsible. So hopefully with Soil-BON having a standardized protocol, we may be able to get more groups on board to use more similar methods and allow us to answer larger questions. So if we are able to start a Canadian or North America Soil-BON, then the question that remains to be determined is what kinds of research questions could we answer at the regional scale that we wouldn't be able to get with the global data. So one possibility is to really drill down on ecoregion level data and try to collect samples throughout all of the ecoregions, kind of along a latitudinal gradient, as you can see in this big map on the left, which doesn't even have the finest categories, obviously, of ecoregions. Or we could try to address, set up the sampling in another way, more looking at specific impacts of human activity. So that map there shows human populations. We could try to sample specifically in very dense areas and areas with little human population and try to compare human impacts on soil biodiversity. These are just some of the possibilities. I think that having regional networks within Soil Bond would really open up a lot of possibilities in terms of answering questions that are specifically relevant to policies in those countries. And that's all I have for slides. So I'm gonna stop sharing here, I think. Yes.
Thank you, Erin. So to follow up on this, so this is a more like a vision type of approach, but Luca will bring us one of the few, I would say, in the world, so broad monitoring systems of soils that now include also soil biodiversity and functions. So Luca, please.
Yes, thank you. Hello to everybody, and I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can see my screen. I will do a very brief introduction to what we do. By the way, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Luca Montanarella, working at the European Commission. I was presented by you, Carlos, as Italian. Indeed, I'm from Italy, but I work for the European Commission, which for the ones of you who are not familiar with the European Union, is the governing body of the European Union. Actually, I work in a service of the Commission, which is called Joint Research Center. Our job is to be at the interface between science and policy making. We are a service of the Commission that is there to support the policy making side with the necessary data, science, and evidence in order to base our EU policies on actual facts and figures and hard data. Now, to the soils. When did we start this? Well, we started all this back in the 90s when we started to think that Europe should also have a common understanding about soils. Soils, as you know, are very diverse, and it was a huge effort from our side to bring this diversity into a unity. So in understanding together with all European countries our soil resources, to map them, to document them. And this is not an easy task because traditionally in different European countries, we have had different scientific communities doing different approaches with different classification systems. So it was a major effort, and it resulted in what is currently known as the European Soil Database, which you see here represented for just some soil properties. You can download and access all the data as much as you want over our European Soil Data Center. And actually, if you're interested also, you can access the long series then of atlases that we have produced that document what we know about soils in Europe and also in the world, and we'll come back to that. And so you can also get a copy of the Soil Atlas of Europe if you want from our publication office of the European Commission. Is there any soil biodiversity at that time? I'm talking of the 1990s. Very, very little, because at that time we realized that we knew very little about soil biodiversity in Europe. What was relevant for us being at the interface between science and policy making is that out of this work that we did on understanding soil resources in the European Union came also the initiative to have a common policy approach to the European Union, and this is what is known as the soil thematic strategy. I will not go into details of that, but what is relevant is that within that policy strategy, which has different pillars of action, you will find that soil biodiversity for the first time enters also into the policy arena and is recognized as an important policy, an important biodiversity pool to be addressed. The old strategy is built on the concept of soil functions. This is a very important new aspect in this policy framework. We don't want to protect soils. We want to protect in the European Union soil functions. These functions deliver public services, so something that is relevant to all of us. And this is the main issue when we address the big problem that, of course, most of the European soils, but also in the world, are in private property rights. So if you want to address something that goes beyond private property, you must identify what are the services that these soils deliver to all of us. I will not go through all the 7 functions that we have here, just to highlight that the European Union there for the first time in 2006 has put on the table in the European Parliament and in the Council the fact that biodiversity, soil biodiversity, is an important function of soil and needs to be protected for future generations. Out of that statement came, of course, then a big initiative to understand better what is the soil, the biodiversity we have below ground in Europe. And that led to the publication in 2010 of the first European Atlas on soil biodiversity. We presented that as a contribution to the International Year of Biodiversity 2010 in the CBD COP in Nagoya in Japan. And out of that work, of course, came a lot of new initiatives in improving research and investing in research in the European Union to understand better the many areas of biodiversity that we don't know so well still in our union. And of course, another consequence of that work was that we realized that we cannot address biodiversity in isolation, just in the European Union. We need to look to biodiversity as a global issue, to soil biodiversity as a global issue. And that triggered the work that has been just published a couple of years ago in 2016, which is the Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas that we released together with many colleagues, especially with the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative that is represented here. Now, you were interested to know how we monitor soil biodiversity. Well, you mentioned already, Carlos, our Lucas soil monitoring system. This is a system that we have been building over the years on top of a land use, land cover aerial survey that we do regularly on a regular grid 2 by 2 kilometer all over the European Union. What does it mean? We have surveyors going on a regular grid every 2-3 years on sites which are located at very precise identified locations all across the European Union and make observations on these sites. Traditionally, these were mostly land use, land cover observations. So essentially they recorded type of management practices, type of land use, type of land cover, and so on. Since 2009, we also taken on a subset of these locations. You should imagine roughly at the 2 by 2 kilometer grid over the European Union, we have roughly 1,100,000 points. We cannot, of course, afford to do sampling on all these points. So we have a small subset, which is roughly 25,000 sites on which surveyors take a soil sample. This soil sampling started in 2009, and where we take these samples to one single laboratory where we make a number of measurements, chemical, physical, and since recently also some biological observations. This type of sampling happens on a regular basis. So the first one was in 2009, the second one 2015, 2018, which we are currently evaluating. And then we're planning already for the next survey, 2021-22. And this is the tool we use to monitor what is happening on European soils on a regular basis. Now, what is the output of this is freely accessible to you over our European Soil Data Center. It's a number of soil parameters that you can access on a point basis, but also, of course, what we are interested is to do then some spatial interpolation of this data so that we have a geographic representation of these parameters. Concerning soil biodiversity, these are essentially metagenomic measurements. So DNA sequences of soil samples that allows us then to derive some information about biodiversity levels in European soils. This is just at the beginning, so we hope that we will further develop this system in the near future, particularly through the new initiative that we just launched December last year at the occasion of the World Soil Day, which is the new EU Soil Observatory, which will deliver regular data on soil parameters, including soil biodiversity, particularly I would say soil biodiversity, because our new main framework for what we will do on soils will be within the EU biodiversity strategy and particularly within the revised EU soil strategy. Thank you. And if you're interested, of course, you can go on our website and get the full information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luca. and we will finish this round of talks with Andy Gonzalez and GeoBond. Andy, maybe you can start.
Carlos, I think it's Ika next, no?
Oh, sorry, that's true. I'm sorry. Ika, please. You are fully correct. Sorry,
okay.
Ika.
No, it's fine. So can you see it?
Yes, we can, Ika, but you have to go to your, I don't know how to pronounce that. On the top of your screen, in the middle, there's an arrow, just on top of your mouse. The top of your screen, there's a name and an arrow. If you click there, you have to switch the view. On top of it, there's a computer there. It says Eisenstellungen, something like this. Yeah, there. If you click there.
Nothing happened.
You have to click on the word that you have there, no?
So start again.
You may have two screens, I think.
Yes, I do.
You have to share the screen that is in full screen. Perfect. Thank you.
So now?
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Great. Thanks a lot, and hello, everybody. I'm Ika Djukic. I'm a vegetation and soil ecologist and coordinator of the global litter decomposition initiative that we call Decomposition. I was asked to give a graph overview how we started and where the initiative goes. Already during my master thesis, I have visited a seminar on terrestrial ecosystem led by scientists that are operating the global alpine vegetation survey, Gloria, that some of you might know. And already back then I was fascinated working in such a global network, and have seen myself researching in diverse ecosystems worldwide. And during my PhD, work led me indeed to the alpine research, where a significant part of the research was devoted to the study of litter decomposition processes and the role of different drivers, especially soil biodiversity. And for this, we use different approaches as a topic label substrate, but also traditional litter bags. And when the Tibet method was introduced by a group of Koiskamp et al., I started working with the Tibet across elevation gradients in the alpine ecosystems, looking at the long-term effect of the different drivers in alpine ecosystems on the decomposition. The Tibet method is quite simple method. We use commercially available tea as a pre-made litter bag. One is a green tea that is a proxy for rather fast decomposing litter, and rooibos tea that decompose slowly. When I moved to the other institution, the Environmental Agency, the International Long-Term Ecosystem Research Network was very much interested to apply this methodology across the network. We were invited to give a workshop, and during this workshop, also other networks and experimental networks have joined the initiative. So the Tibet method was for the networks a valuable add-on for their ongoing research as a common metric to have the chance to have comparison between the sites, within the network, but also to be compared at a global level. And for the initiative itself, we benefit a lot of existing infrastructure, but also of available data, since between the decomposition initiative, we are not only measuring the mass loss. So we started in 2016 with huge enthusiasms and quite homeopathic doses on resources, and the response was really amazing. 570 terrestrial sites have joined the initiative, and Unilever has also sponsored the tea so that the same batch was used throughout the study. And 1 year later, we also extended the initiative to marine and freshwater ecosystems through the collaboration with the colleagues from Blue Carbon Laboratory in Australia. So today, around 300 institutions worldwide are involved in implementing this initiative. We are collecting with a standard T harmonized data on the litter decomposition in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, which will help us to get the idea on the global litter carbon turnover. And by having both the global monitoring and experimental networks involved and their background data, we will be able to link them to as a drivers to our muscles, and use also this data to validate and calibrate soil carbon models, which again will help us with the forecasts that are important for science and policy on this in the interface. Very important here is to also highlight the role of the litter carbon turnover on greenhouse gas effects, and this is a portion that is always calculated in the national greenhouse gas inventories, but also important for the ICPB reporting. So the work that we are doing within tea composition initiatives very much aligned with the SDG goal climate action, and as a partnership and network organization is also a very excellent example for collaboration, which is a prerequisite if we are dealing with the global change challenges. I have introduced you methodology and spoke about its harmonized data that are relevant for policy and the model application. And we heard at the beginning about this gap filling, and although the methodology is quite simple, we also have a low amount of data in commonly underrepresented area. So we hope also that through the collaboration with GEOBond, this gap can be closed. And we also hope that the methodology, but also the collected data can be used for the education in the school for the graduate students, and hope that through the further cooperation, we can really get a good foundation for global collaboration, global funding, and knowledge exchange. With this, I will end, and we will be happy if you would join, and if possible, also to contact me in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ika. And now, yes, Andy with GEO BON.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you to the organizers of this fantastic event. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Monica. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I've been asked to say a few words about the Group on Earth Observations Biodiversity Observation Network, GEOBON. I am Andy Gonzalez. I'm a biodiversity scientist based at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. And I'm also the co-director of the Quebec Center for Biodiversity Science, which is now the new host institution for the Secretariat of GEOBON. And in that role, I am joined by Maria Cecilia Londoño, based at the Humboldt Institute in Colombia, as the co-chair. Since January 1 of this year, we are co-chairs of this amazing network. So what is the history of GEOBON? How did it start? Was it policy or research driven? These are the questions that Carlos asked us to address. GEOBON was born in 2008. It was founded in April by 100 biodiversity specialists who all converged on Potsdam in Germany to complete the founding documents, the conceptual framework and scheme that was subsequently published in Science Policy Forum in August of 2008. Since that time, GEOBON has gone through 3 phases. In the first phase, this period from 2008 to 2014, it expanded its network and started by building a series of communities of practice, how to take biodiversity observations, how to curate that information and turn it into the indicators that the national parties to the CBD and many other partnerships, governments, businesses, researchers need to make this process open and shareable and fair. But in 2014, the GeoBond underwent a significant reorganization and focused its efforts on being a major contributor to GEO, or the Group on Earth Observations. And in 2016, it became a flagship network of GEO, whose goal is to create an integrated global Earth observation system of systems. So GeoBond is dedicated to this task from the biodiversity point of view. And when the Secretariat moved to Leipzig around 2014, the great effort was focused on developing two pillars of the research: essential biodiversity variables and enhancing the biodiversity observation network process. Today, GeoBond is a global network with more than 1,500 registered members scattered across 118 countries and more than 900 partner institutions. The mission of GeoBond is to improve the acquisition, coordination, and delivery of biodiversity observations and related services to users, including decision makers in the scientific community. As I just said, the third phase has begun. We are, the Secretariat has moved from Leipzig and is now based in Montreal at the Quebec Center for Biodiversity Science. And we're excited to begin this new phase in the history of GeoBond as we look to the future. So what type of policy relevant information does GeoBond provide? I would say that the core of that answer to that question is shown here on this slide, which is showing you the integrated cycle from data to policy that GeoBond is promoting. The first of these is thinking about how to collate and share integrated biodiversity observations, right? Whether those observations are made on the land and in the sea or in fresh waters using traditional methods, more advanced methods that typical of remote sensing or environmental DNA. The idea is to integrate these pieces of information so they're contributing to the assessment of biodiversity change around the world. GeoBond, since 2014, has built itself around this structure. That is that members of GeoBond, and anyone can be a member of GeoBond, it's a free and open network, have focused on the development of the concept of essential biodiversity variables. This is an analogous concept to the essential climate variables of our climate colleagues, where the aim is to figure out how to develop these data to decision pipelines for the different facets of biodiversity, whether that is genetic composition, species and population traits, community composition, ecosystem structure, and ecosystem services. The idea is that we need these different elements of information to make informed decisions. In combination with EBVs, the other focus has been on the bond development. And we've seen the formation of national and regional bonds, but also significant and important thematic bonds like soil bond, but also others like freshwater and marine bond. And so the aim is to integrate these components so that we are accelerating the supply of information, biodiversity, knowledge to the national parties of the CBD, but also other partners like IPBES. And we see this as an iterative cycle over and over that improves our understanding and our learning about the state of nature and how it's changing around the world. So as I said, in parallel to the EBV process, we're proud of the development of this bond network, a global network of networks of biodiversity observations around the world. And currently there are 24 such bonds. But our ambition is to double those bonds in the next 3 years and then double it again the 3 years after during the 6-year lifespan of this Secretariat. Another important contribution of GeoBond is the Ebv Data Portal, which is now available. You can go visit it on the GeoBond webpage. And this is designed to make the latest information about these essential biodiversity variables available to all, where you can go to the Explorer, click on your choice of variable, your location, your geographic location, and get an immediate access to data, the best data that we have available, seen through the lens of EBVs. So what are the next steps for GeoBond? Well, we have an ambitious path forward. We're at the beginnings of this next phase, and I would like to focus on 3 different ways forward. First of all, our ambition is that by 2024, we will transform GeoBond into a permanently funded organization. At this time, it is a volunteer network, a community of practice, but has no core research funding. So I am committed with Maria to create the funding base that we need to accelerate our capacity. We want to support an integrated global network of bonds that enable national, regional, and international cooperation and collaboration among the bonds. We want to provide biodiversity information and services, especially to the CBD parties, but of course, our partner organizations, governments, businesses, researchers, and the public. I just came away from a SBSTA meeting, an informal SBSTA meeting last week, and it was clear that all of the parties that were present expressed a great need for a streamlined and easy to do workflow that turns biodiversity information into indicators that are needed for the new global biodiversity framework. And of course, to do that requires communities of practice. We need to build capacity, provide technical support, curate information, and make available workflows to our partners so that they can track the trends and changes in biodiversity, no matter what scale they're working at. So our vision is an integrated network of networks where biodiversity observation is commonplace and easy and is transforming decisions to bend the curve of biological diversity worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy, for your presentation. I would also ask all our panelists also to turn on their cameras. And we can also start moving to this Q&A session with all of us. So we already have several questions in the chat. I will start with the first ones that came to us, but I will try to organize them by topic. And I hope that I don't miss any at this point. The first questions were actually related to me. The first one came from George, and he mentions that he asks if there was a reason for macroinvertebrates not to be included in this network, especially because there are ISO protocols and other standard ways of monitoring them. The same applies for the question from Eduardo regarding the soil type. These are, we didn't overlook them. So by the way, this, Andy pointed out to something that I think it's key here. GeoBond and SoilBond as part of GeoBond is a community of practice. So whatever we make is conditioned by the people that are making it. And this is in a volunteer network. So there's no actual funding apart from the funding that every institution, every volunteer puts into this. So with this being said, it's not that we don't want to do it, is that we, in one hand, we maybe miss the resources. And in the particular case of macrofauna, we actually miss the legal background, because transporting living animals, transporting living organisms across the world, according to Nagoya, and actually the CBD has a stand on that, is not an easy process. And it's not that we don't want to, we actually even have the protocol to do it, it's just that we still did not overcome that process. Regarding soil type, it's a different question. Actually, we are trying to have a partnership with USDA, USGS, that has an app that allows us to classify soils across the world. It's just that it's in the working. So if you want to contribute to this, the key message is please contribute to it. We are not a closed system. We are as open as we can be. So then apart from these, the first question I have is actually for you, Luca, or maybe you can address this initially, because Talita Tavares is asking us, we have a first question before that from Luisa, and she's asking us if there is any central repository for soil meta barcoding. So how is the GRC thinking about organizing the data that comes from the DNA analysis in soils, and if this is meant to be through GEBIF, for example?
Well, we would like to have a structured approach to that in the future, when we will have a fully operational EU soil observatory. For the moment, we are very much on a, how can I say, ad hoc phase, because it's the first time we did this exercise. By the way, it turned out to be a logistical nightmare, as you were mentioning, because even so in the European Union, we have free movement of goods. So that allows us to send all the soil samples to a single laboratory. Still, there is an issue of transporting samples in a refrigerated state, storing them under the correct conditions. All this requires an enormous logistic effort that for the moment we have no fixed plan on that, but I think we should have a fixed plan. But as you say, this cannot be done on a voluntary basis. There must be a common strategy on how we want to proceed on that. I doubt that we as Commission will be doing this in-house. This requires something that some effort that we are not prepared to do in-house. What I feel is much more feasible is that we will operate through a network that will be of our partners across the European Union and do this in a networked way. Could be that one country wants to take the lead and then wants to host what you would call a repository. But for the moment, we are not really organized for that.
So I was going to say that the GRC and Lucas per se is already a good example of how different communities can collaborate, because although the GRC has provided the basic structure for monitoring soils in Europe, many others have contributed to it in doing specific analysis to it, for example, for parts of the soil samples that you collect. So I would move on to a question for Ika. The question is, how will T-bags give information about the detritivous communities' involvement in the composition?
Well, there are three strategies that we are doing. One is through the collaboration, we were able to collect soil samples at the 24th month of the incubation. So that is the first step where we can link at least how the soil microbial community will affect the decomposition. And what we also did, we have tried to get as many samples as possible freeze-dried, so that enable us to run a microbial analysis ourselves through projects. And the third one is the collaboration such as GEO BON. So they will measure the biodiversity and we will measure mass loss so that we can link those data.
And by the way, Ika, how do you, it's a question for me now, it's how can SoilBond contribute, for example, to the monitoring across time of these measurements that you do with litter?
Well, of course, this is not decided yet, but if it will be a kind of monitoring, then it will be a value of benefits for both networks. For SoilBond, getting information on the function. It's not only always interesting to see who is there, but also how it contributes. And litter decomposition is such a fundamental process. So if it will be repeated over time, we will get this measure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Andy, So question to you, any idea or support to local species which are getting lost in remote areas? And how is the approach to protect them, or by international funds, or how to preserve them? Do you have any ideas on this?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a great question. Obviously, GeoBond operates at multiple levels. It's a global framework, but it's only going to work if we can iterate that framework down to the local scale, right? The idea is to not only to standardize the way that we quantify change, but also how that information is used to inform conservation on the ground. So let me give you an example. In Quebec, what we're doing is applying this workflow that I presented today to the Quebec region. There are many remote parts of Quebec where using the GeoBond framework has been able to convince local ministries, NGOs, and towns to rally around this standardized approach. So for example, we can work on the problem of ecosystem structure, ecosystem connectivity. We've applied this sort of EBV framework linked to data on the ground, and that has then mobilized this community of engagement, community of actors and practice to work on local issues. So then we can mobilize funding to do that. But the credibility of the approach brought by GeoBond is what has enhanced the process. So of course, the context for Quebec is not going to be the same as the context in Colombia or Peru or South Africa or Australia. That there are particular communities of practice and action in each location. So it's essential that we work from the bottom up, just as we work from the top down, that we have to value the local cycle that is promoted by GeoBond in order to, I think, meet our local and regional conservation goals. That the global goals will only be met if we achieve success locally. That's clear.
Yeah, and actually this opens a bit of floor to me to go over a question from George and also from Frank and others. Specifically on earthworms, but it applies to other macrofauna groups, where an alternative that we have been exploring, but again, this is made by people and people have to participate. So if you are willing to participate, please do, is to organize global sections, all global task forces with experts. So this would allow us, instead of transporting, let's say, macroinvertebrates across the world, to have experts in each country or in each region that could do the monitoring for the same sites, and in this way mobilize data across the world. So if this is an initiative that you want to lead, you have an open door here. I have for you, Luca, and maybe I can also go a bit further on this. I already know that the European Commission has an initiative in Africa, so there's a question on how, if there are special considerations to include more sampling in less covered regions, like in the case of the European Commission in Africa, but also across the world, or for example, in the case of Europe, in regions like the Alps, where it's very hard to get data from there because of conditions there. If there's any special consideration on that.
Sure. Africa is a big priority for us as Commission. Concerning sampling soils, I mean, we have a program called Africa Soil that is now running. We have a project financed within our Horizon Europe program. So this is a research project that is essentially there to demonstrate that we can apply the same approach as we do in the European Union with LUCAS, also in Africa, sort of LUCAS for Africa. But these are, as usual, I would say, research programs. You see, there is a big difference between doing research and doing operational monitoring. These are two very different things. You know, doing research is one thing that is very nice. Usually it leads to new research findings, usually nice papers. But if you want to do operational monitoring, you must have a close link between what you do and some policy outcome. You know, otherwise it will never never be sustainable on a long term. You must imagine doing soil monitoring is extremely costly. So you have to have people going on site, taking samples, bringing them back, sending them to a lab, and doing very often quite sophisticated analysis. All this is costing a fortune. And so you can do this as a one-time exercise for a research purpose within a research program, like we do, for example, with the current exercise in Africa. But if you want to move on to something which is operational, then you must clearly link what we want to do on soil biodiversity monitoring with a policy priority. So here comes up what we are planning with our EU Soil Observatory, which is embedded in what we call the new European Green Deal, and then the vision that we have for the future, not only in Europe, but also globally for our new biodiversity strategy. And so if we succeed to bring soil biodiversity on the same level of recognition as above ground biodiversity, in the sense, if one day there will be the same concern for protecting a species which is below ground as we do for a species which is rare or threatened or above ground, then we will get there. As long as there is no recognition that we need to protect soil biodiversity in the same way as we do for the above ground biodiversity, we will do a lot of nice research exercises, but never we will come to the point where we do operational monitoring. And this is valid in, I think, both at EU level, but also globally. And as I hope we will get there, so somehow.
I have another question for you, but just before we move on, just for figures, the soil bond alone, so this is all volunteer institutions, and we account for 1.3 million euros in volunteer contributions. So this is not sustainable on the long run. We can achieve, let's say, 4 years with this, but not more than that. As for covering specific regions, in soil bond particularly, and I know that's valid for other systems, is that in soil bond, you register your site. If your site gets selected, we take care of everything. So we send you a box with everything that you need to do for sampling. You just have to open the box, follow the protocol. We'll have meetings with you to answer any questions that you may have in terms of the protocol itself. It's a very simple protocol. And you have everything inside the box that you need. You may want to have other things to make it easier, but if you want to sample, you can sample with everything that is inside this box. And we also cover the shipping back for these specific regions. So these target regions where we don't have enough information. For other regions like in Europe, we do the same thing, but we don't cover the mobilization costs because we expect that institutions already can overcome this issue. But for you, Luca, again, the question is, what type of biological indicators are considered or already included in the monitoring programs of the EU?
That's a good question. Because as I said before, this is extremely costly. So why should we monitor biodiversity? Any reason? And I think the only reason that we can bring up is that a healthy soil is a soil that is alive, and a healthy soil will produce healthy food. And if we produce healthy food, people will be willing to pay taxes in order to finance a monitoring system. Okay, so it's all connected, in my view, to the issue of not monitoring only soil biodiversity, but monitoring also everything that is affecting soil biodiversity. To give you an example, I think that we should focus a lot on soil contamination in the EU. I'm talking because we have a huge issue about soil contamination, and it's linked with soil biodiversity. So what to measure? I honestly think we still have to have a discussion on this. We are still in the definition phase of our next survey. So, and honestly, I'm a little bit reluctant to move on if we don't see at least the final results of the first survey, because we should not forget, we did this exercise only once until now, and we still didn't publish the results. So I'm waiting for the final evaluation of what we have been doing there to see what we should do next. But I repeat, there must be a very clear link between monitoring and a societal outcome. So what is the benefit to citizens for the fact that we monitor soil biodiversity? I give you another example. We have a huge pressure concerning biodegradable plastic. So the authorization to use a degradable mulching material in agriculture. You will not degrade anything if the soil is dead, and if there's not enough diversity and enough, the biological engine of the soil is not working. So if we link the monitoring of soil biodiversity with, for example, the degradation of biodegradable plastic materials, then we have a big push towards increasing our monitoring effort also in that area. But I repeat, if we don't demonstrate that, it was very difficult, because you must imagine it's a huge logistical exercise, and this is very difficult to justify it in front of taxpayers.
Yeah, yes, but I can vouch on that also, because, for example, when we addressed this from a policy point of view. We were trying to understand how we could target these policies, how could we contribute to a better policy design. But for example, in the case of Lucas, we also have developed work with you that focus, for example, specifically on carbon sequestration and how, for example, agriculture can contribute from that. Erin, I have a question that applies to you. So how can people directly contribute? How can individual people get involved with these type of initiatives?
Yeah, was this there were some questions about citizen science, I guess, also, but yeah, so for Soil Bond, we'll be making a call for people to submit sites that could be included. So that's one way anyone could participate. And then I think at regional levels, there's also like potential to have sort of add-on projects that could be more citizen science based. Carlos can maybe, or others may be able to add more to this. But.
Yeah, maybe Ika, you can also say how these two facets can contribute to your network.
Of course, I think involving local citizens to be engaged in such a global initiative is always good, because you can enhance literacy on the ecosystem understanding. But there is also a challenge if the samples comes from the area where you don't have any background data. Like when you go with the decomposition initiative, it's also challenging not having resources to dig into it. So there is a big chance, but also challenge involving the citizen sciences, and it is definitely related to the resources, I see.
Yeah, so I would say the same, but I would also so in Soil Bond specifically, as Luca was saying, this is a significant investment from everyone, even the people that send the soil. So although maybe they don't spend resources, they will spend their time, they will spend their motivation. And this is not a one-off. So as Luca was also referring to this, we are not operational. This is still a research initiative, but we want to monitor these sites. So this means collecting data in a regular basis on the same place. So this requires a commitment that most of the citizen science approaches don't have that type of commitment, because it's more fortuitous type of information. This does not impede that this information is gathered, but for example, we are now collaborating with GEBIF to mobilize that type of information, to support this type of activities, and to have citizen science approaches also contributing to these initiatives. As I said before, I will keep saying, we are all volunteers. So if you want to organize something on this, please join us and we will welcome you for sure. Let's see, how can we involve? So I wanted to move to questions. So if you have any questions for me specifically, you can send me an email, I will answer them. I would like to take advantage of the rest of the panel that is here. So again, for you, Luca, question to you. So would it be a good idea to connect Lucas to Bioscan in Europe? This is the European Consortium of Barcoding of Life. That's I know this, and that is building just now meta barcoding library for, I think it's macroinvertebrates, but they also include other soil animals.
That I'm sorry by repeating myself, but it's all depending on the question: what will be the future of the biodiversity, the soil biodiversity component within LUCAS? LUCAS is not a soil biodiversity monitoring system. It's the official monitoring system on soils of our statistical service. The statistical service of the EU is Eurostat. So the data we produce there are not for research, are the official data of the European Union concerning soils. And so the question is, will this soil biodiversity component, which is a tiny part of LUCAS, really a little experiment that we did, will it evolve into the direction of becoming the official monitoring system for soil biodiversity with official data reported to our statistical service? Or will it evolve into something which will stay as a research exercise? If it evolves a direction to be a research exercise, then yes, we will probably give it away or facilitate it, but still essentially delegate it to many actors that there are in Europe that are willing to continue this. There are plenty of research consortia that, by the way, are usually financed by us, like the European Joint Programming Initiative on soil, on agricultural soils, or the many others. And it will continue to be a research-driven activity, or it will move into something which is linked to a policy priority. In that case, then it will evolve in a completely different way. In that case, it will stay strictly under very, very rigid quality control and supervision by our statistical service. We should not forget that LUCAS data are collected by our statistical service, not by us as JRC. We are just providing the let's say, the scientific, technical support to that, but the actual implementation is done by Eurostat, our statistical service. So that's a big distinction that you must understand. I cannot predict in which direction we will go. It will depend very much to which extent we will be able to place soil biodiversity into the policy arena, not only in the EU, but also in the CBD. I mean, the recent report that was asked by the last CBD COP, that, by the way, was on the first page of this seminar, the famous soil biodiversity report, should be the starting point of a policy decision in the next CBD COP. If this happens, then you can have official monitoring of soil biodiversity done in a systematic way, not for research purposes, but for policy reporting purposes.
Yeah, I have a question that also applies to you, Luca, but I will drive it from Andy. So Andy, at least because Lucas was mentioning this support of the CBD at the decision, the policy decision at the CBD level. So touching on soils, but also going a bit further than that, who do you think could be responsible for this? Because soil bond is a construction. So sorry, GeoBond is a construction. GeoBond is not. You said that you want it to be something that is funded on its own right, but how do we get there? So who's responsible for this monitoring and to establish this?
Is that to me?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay. On the question of who is responsible for paying for a global biodiversity observation network?
Not necessarily for paying, but who do you see the responsibility laying in terms of actually monitoring this across borders? Because every country can implement their own system. But for example, in the case of Lucas, it's a very interesting thing that is moved by Eurostat, because Eurostat is on a European level, so it covers all countries at once. So who do you think at the global level could be, or how could we implement this at the global level?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So where does the mandate come from to do all this work and supply this information? And of course, the mandate primarily is driven by a UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the supporting UN organizations that can contribute and need biodiversity observations. And right now, as you know, there's a post-2020 global biodiversity framework being implemented and revised and negotiated. And we think and hope that probably for the first time, global monitoring will be a target. I don't want to say that too loudly in case it disappears from the framework, but for the first time, we would require of the parties to meet that target and to make progress towards clear quantitative targets for assessing the status of change in biodiversity at the party scale, at the scale of a country. But then, of course, you know, the national needs might not entirely match regional needs or local needs. So then you're dealing with mandates from very different levels, from national and provincial governments or county governments or municipalities. But one of the advantages of having something like GeoBon is that you can harmonize this process across levels so that a local actor or a regional actor is contributing to the global data set, but also vice versa, that you have this collective learning, cooperative action that allows you to enhance your own understanding of what's happening locally, right? So several of the panelists today spoke about the great gaps in biodiversity. There's probably none greater than in soils. And I think that what's clear is that we need a combination of structured and unstructured data, citizen science, formalized monitoring networks integrated into a single framework supported by advanced models that allow us to fill gaps and quantify uncertainty. My vision is that for every pixel of the planet, we have some score of how much biodiversity knowledge we have. Whether that knowledge is semantic and expert-based or traditional knowledge or very data-rich and model-derived. But if every pixel could raise the quality and the level of biodiversity knowledge that we have, then we can start sharing information that we know that we can actually create a collective understanding. You know, and I hope, my final point is I hope that the next COP will give some institution a mandate to coordinate this global process. I don't know if it's going to be something like GeoBond, a big network of networks, or whether it be something like, I don't know, UNEP, WCMC, some monitoring center, but we need some institution that can help coordinate this and be fully funded by the parties.
So far, that is not binding, unfortunately, but Luca, I have two questions from two Marias, Briones and Tiasifuli, and they ask, first they ask if there's a plan to reinstate the EU soil strategy again as a directive from at the EU level, because there was already an attempt to do something like that. And second, the second question is related to the fact that countries already have the mandate to monitor and to report on the status of specific species, at least for the Natura 2000 sites. So the question would be how not to drive the effort of sampling on those sites, at least to make it mandatory on those sites to sample soils.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There is an allergy to make things mandatory. So usually if you want to make something mandatory, there must be a good reason for it. Concerning the question on the soil thematic strategy, I think, well, first of all, the soil thematic strategy exists. It's not that it's in the implementation phase since 2006. Only one element of that strategy was never past the council and actually past the parliament, but not the council. That is the part which was a legal binding instrument called Soil Framework Directive. We have a plan to revise our strategy in this year, and actually there's an ongoing public consultation where every European citizen can put in his or her opinion on our website till April, so you can easily comment on the strategy directly. We usually do very open public consultations for all legislation we do. Then we will see what will be the outcome of the consultation, and then we will come up with a proposal to the Parliament and to the Council on that. What I really hope is that soil biodiversity will score much higher than in the previous discussion. And I'm pretty sure it will, because as I said, I think we did a lot of homework over the past, I would say, at least 20 years, as I was trying to show in my very short introductory presentation, a lot of homework to bring soil biodiversity to the attention of the policymakers, but particularly also to the attention of the citizen. And I think now we have a much better understanding that soil biodiversity is a relevant issue as above ground biodiversity. Now, if you talk about the mandatory monitoring and the mandatory measurements, this requires a legislation that must be linked. For example, I'll give you an example. In the EU, we have sites which are called Natura 2000 sites. We have a legislation for protecting specially threatened species or ecosystems, which is the Habitat Directive, which selects sites in Europe which are under very stringent condition being monitored and protected. We still don't have one single site in the EU that has been nominated by member states to be protected because there is some precious soil biodiversity. The day that we will have one member state proposing to us a site to be protected because there is some precious biodiversity, some precious soil species, whatever, I think then we will really have made a major change in the paradigm, because suddenly soil biodiversity will be on the same level as above ground biodiversity. For the moment, I didn't see any proposal on that level, never.
Yes, that will be a future that I would like to live in, actually.
Well, maybe you should think of a possible site in the EU or maybe in the world which is so precious, the soil biodiversity, that we should protect it. Yeah. I don't have a clue because I'm not actually a soil biodiversity expert, I must admit, but I'm actually not an expert on anything, but so maybe you can help us in finding one of those sites.
We are working on that, Luca. To be honest, we are working on that. Let's see. There were several questions related to the both the number of biological or functional parameters that could be included in a network like this, and if this list can be improved or expanded. The quick answer is yes. Yes, you can help us expand this list of parameters. If you want to contribute to this network, you can contribute either as a soil provider or as a lab. And as a lab, you will have access to all the samples that we collect, and you can perform your analysis on them. Ideally, you can perform complementary analysis to what we are already doing, but not necessarily. You can have a specific research question that we can also support. So contact us if that's the case. Erin, I have a question for you. So what are the next steps, or what could be the next steps for constituting a North American network that could also provide this type of assessments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if I exactly have the answers, but I guess for Canada, we would like to still do a review to look at what data we currently have and who is currently collecting soil biodiversity data, because I think if we know that, then we might have some automatic collaborators who would be interested in participating in Soil Bond. So at the Canadian level, I think we have some sort of background level steps to take. At the across North American level, I guess more discussion between the US, Canada, and Mexico. Anyone who's interested would be great. So I don't know, if you are in one of these countries and you're interested, then maybe send Diana, Wall, or I an email and we can see where to go.
So related to this, you can always register at the GeoBond website as a GeoBond member and list your, maybe I can ask Monica to, I think she already posted the website in the chat, but if you follow it, and you can also say that you want to preferably participate in Soil Bond, this allows us to more quickly have access to you and to your viewpoints. But related to this, Andy, there's a question for you related to, maybe you cannot necessarily answer this, but you can give a nice idea, related to the participation of soil scientists in GeoBond, either now or even before SoilBond appeared.
Well, there are various ways I think soil scientists can create their own community within GeoBond, and this is currently done in fun ways like the annual conference, on symposia and events that are organized by GeoBond. But more functionally, I think where it's already we have a great SoilBond community that's building, but what we intend to do, Maria, Cecilia, and I, is in the new phase of GeoBond, is to propose something called knowledge hubs. This is a mode of functioning that will be very different from the more academic working group style that I presented today, where this would be an outward facing mode of functioning where partners and knowledge users, to put it bluntly, are participating in this operational hub. So this is the way that we can get this sort of data to user or data to decision pipeline. And I think that is where this new mode of functioning can be very valuable for what, I mean, when I look at what the role that soils play and how essential understanding how soils are changing for various decision makers, it seems to me that this new knowledge hub structure could be an important focus for soil biodiversity scientists. And that doesn't need to be global, right? We don't have just to have global hubs. These can be national or regional hubs. Now, this idea has not been established yet within GeoBond because we're only 6 weeks into our mandate, but this is going to be hopefully part of the way we will operate in the future in the next by the summer. So I reiterate Carlos's invitation to you all to get involved. By being in the GeoBond network, being a member allows us to reach out to you and for you to reach us and take on board your ideas. And we're really in this creative phase right now of thinking how to restructure for the next 6 years so that GeoBond is relevant no matter who you are and what scale you're operating at.
And soil scientists, actually, within the framework of GeoBond, we are not a small group. So we are growing by the numbers and you can be one of them. Erin, you listed that you wanted to answer Anthony live. Can you read the question maybe and answer it?
Yes, I just have to find the question again here. Yeah, he had a previous comment that was directed to me. So he said here, would you describe a good method of driving cooperation between the various laboratories that would be analyzing the data when there is a limited will for standardized methodology on a regional scale? That's definitely a big problem, and like there's not an easy answer to that. But I guess what I would say is that SoilBond has a standardized method, which is potentially easier to get people on board with than competing laboratories that each have their own method. I think that it's perhaps easier to say, hey, there's this global data set that's being collected. If you collect data in a similar way, then you can also be part of that. So that might be one way to convince laboratories at the regional scale to adopt some more similar methodology. The other point is that, I mean, that data isn't going to waste even if it is collected, or it doesn't have to go to waste even if methodologies aren't similar. As Andy was kind of talking about before, with different pixels that have different levels of knowledge, we can still use that kind of data for like a meta-analysis or data synthesis approach. So yeah, I think stressing the global nature of SoilBond will hopefully get more regional laboratories on board, but any soil biodiversity data is useful in these areas where we know very little.
Yeah, and one way that we overcome some of those issues is that we allow everyone to do whatever they want. The only thing is that you have to be complementary. So even if your lab does all the analysis the others are doing, you maybe won't only do one, and then you get the data from the others. This allows for people to have nicer coffee, well, former coffee discussions now over Zoom, but allows at least for a quicker integration of people instead of fights. Andy, you listed that you also wanted to answer Monica's question. Do you mind reading it or saying what it is about and answering it?
I'm muted. Now I'm not. So Monica asked a very important question of, oh, that's exciting. How can we create a local or regional effort in the light of GeoBond? And as I said, the first step is to join GeoBond for the reason that you said, Carlos, to enable coordination and action. But then I think specific to enabling your own BON locally or regionally can be facilitated by following a series of steps. And these steps have been formalized by GeoBond and are available on the BON in a Box site. It's a tool kit that provides guidelines on how to create partnership networks, what kind of steps have to happen for the BON to have legitimacy. Of course, you can't just come in and impose a BON on any place. This has to come from partners and from the network, but that can be harmonized. And so visit the BON in a Box website, and then of course reach out to us, and we can either move you to the right working group. There's a BON development working group that can support your efforts. We have limited capacity, of course, but there's a lot of experience there, and we can connect you to the right people with the right experience. From my experience, I've noticed that BONs are taking anywhere between 1 and 5 years to develop, depending on the scale of the network and the geographic extent and the complexity of the things we are measuring. But right now I'm going through the process of trying to set up a Canada BON, right? The second largest country in the world has no formal BON. And so, you know, we see wonderful initiatives like Erin's for one part, an incredibly important part, but imagine all the other components of Canada's biological diversity. So I started that process in December, but it's going to be several months, if not years, to really develop that at that scale. But I'm following the steps that are suggested by BON in a Box.
Yeah, so we are just about to finish. I don't know if any of our panelists wants to pose a question. I would like to answer at least a final question on my side that is about what people can get from sending soils to us. So we worked a lot on the ethics of sampling and how can we transfer benefit to the people that support this network. We are, as I said, we are all volunteers. We don't have a perfect solution, but we have a solution. So the first part of this is that, again, the soil is yours, the data is yours, everything is yours, and you allow us to use it. This is the first part. This means that you will receive all the results that we will get, they are yours. So if you contribute a sample, you will get the same exact data. For the data itself, I can show you again the slide, but I would suggest that you go to the beginning of this presentation, the beginning of this video. You will have a slide with all the parameters that are currently being prioritized. But as I said, if others want to contribute to this, we can enlarge this list and we can have a more comprehensive view of the soil systems. And this is what we actually aim to have. The second component of this is we want to monitor. So the temporal aspect of this is the key issue. So we expect these samples, so these sites to be accessible. Yes, we expect them to be accessible over time, and that we can ask you again to sample the same sites in the same manner, using the same procedures, and we will do the same analysis that we did before. Only this will allow us to answer a very simple question. Is soil biodiversity decreasing or not? We don't have an answer. I think no one has an answer for that. So at least at the global scale, regional scale, local scales, yes, but at the global scale, it's very hard to answer this simple question for which, for example, above ground diversity already has plenty of papers showing something to this respect. Having said this, I don't know if any of our panelists want to say some final words regarding this. Okay, so if not, I'm guessing no. So I will thank you, all of you that were here to listen to us. Thank you to Andy, Erin, Ika, and Luca for standing up today for soils. And we hope to see you all in the next webinar that Monica will announce, hopefully, because I don't have the date for it. I don't know if Monica already has the date for it, but if so, if you can help me, that would be awesome. If not, I thank you all, and I hope to see you soon in person in some other meeting.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
So much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.